My God. It's acting up. All right, here we are. I think I'm on. I don't know because everything's just kind of slow right now. Ugh, my audio was going so well before, and now I am like delayed. So even on. I can already see where this is going. Of course, here comes my computer that was working just fine. Now I'm having all these audio delays. Hello, everybody. So excited to be here with you tonight. Yes and no. For this State of the Field address, this is a play off of the State of the Union address and is only relevant to those who are in America. Okay. So if you are not in the country of America, if you're in Canada, you're in Mexico, you're in Australia, you're in New Zealand, wherever, this is probably not going to be totally relevant, but it might be interesting. You might learn something that you didn't know before prior to being here. So I'm super excited to be with you guys. Feel free to drop a quick hello in the comments. I'm getting a lot of delays as far as me when I'm speaking. Hopefully it's coming through clear for all of you. If it's not, actually what I'll do is I'll take no. There we go. Perfect. I think I got it figured out. So now we can, it's problematic prior to this. So here we are with a welcome. Welcome, welcome. It is so nice to be here with you all. I'm sorry the time kind of ticks on and ticks away, but happy to be here with everyone today. We do have to go back into a couple of days ago, Friday to be more precise. So about the other day, I know for those of you who are on Facebook and on the OMT for the RDH group, you may have seen a little comment that I made, and that, well, it wasn't little because it contained like 2, maybe 3 paragraphs of stuff. You may have seen a comment I made with like a little rant, and I just wanted to talk about that just really briefly. Still bad, but better than. Okay, well, that's sort of helpful. Hopefully we can get some of the static out. I wonder if I change my audio. Let's change my audio. We're having a great time tonight. I don't know why it was working beautifully before, and now it's giving me a hard time. Let's do. Okay, hopefully this works a little bit better. Let me know if you're hearing me better and if the static has kind of gone away. Oh no. There's static. Is it better? Hopefully it's better. Just waiting. Yes, yay! Great, awesome. I have changed my audio, and so hopefully that's gonna flow a little bit better now. Okay, awesome. So about the other day, just to get back into what was going on Friday. So there was a post that was made, and the post and not the poster, and not necessarily anything specific to what was in that post, but there were a lot of things within there that triggered that last little straw that really broke this camel's back. And so I had like a full blown, like, I just couldn't take it anymore. Very frustrated, had to separate myself from the had to separate myself from the social media and, was off for about 24 to 48 hours for a little while. I'll explain a little bit more about that as we kind of go on, because this is going to have a little bit of repeat from a lecture that I did maybe a couple of weeks ago, where it was all about scope of practice. So now we're going to talk about where we are now, because I feel like I'm repeating myself. And that's the problem that got me the most frustrated, is that we've had systems and processes in place for a while to help us so that when we got to this kind of point here, we wouldn't be flustered and kind of all over the place, right? So let's talk about the timeline for a really quick second about the IAAH, the International Association of Airway Hygienists. Now, yes, this particular lecture is relevant only for the US. And frankly, a lot of where the biggest set of priorities for protection when it comes to hygienists in airway, in myo, in dental sleep medicine, a lot of those protections really do stem from a need within the US, more so than what's going on globally or in other countries or in other continents and so forth. So the International Association of Airway Hygienists is international, but the primary goal of it, honestly, was to establish safety for everyone in the US as a primary goal. We wanted to establish an accreditation body. We wanted to establish just a methodology for safety and create a scope of practice for oral myofunctional therapy. Because for registered dental hygienists, that didn't exist. And so when you're looking, I remember one of the first questions that I asked when I got into this, and I asked a study group that subsequently, once my complaint was filed against the New Jersey board against me, subsequently they kicked me out of the study group. So shout out to the Tri-State New York Study Club. Really, really happy to not be a part of that organization anymore. But I remember asking that group of speech language pathologists and registered dental hygienists, because it was a collection of the two sets of professions. I remember asking distinctly, who rules over OMT? Is it the IAOM? Is it the dental board? Is it the speech board? And everybody had the same sort of look of like, oh no, we don't know. There's no really guidance for it. Okay, cool. Love that there's no guidance for it. What we absolutely need is some sort of guidance for it, because if that was a question that I had and then I later went on to teach people and I had no answers for other people, that made no sense to me. So the International Association of Airway Hygienists was developed in 2019, and officially we had our first board. We put together the bylaws, we put together our mission to protect registered dental hygienists practicing in airway, to define a scope of practice, to establish a accrediting body. So in 2019, these conversations were going on, where in other places, these conversations were not being had at all by any organization in any capacity. There was a whole lot of other things going on in other organizations, which is why the IAH was developed and there was a need for such, okay? In 2020, we launched it publicly for membership. So that's when it first became open. And a lot of people were on board with what we were doing. But I think there's been a little bit of a gap in between 2020 and 2024, where we are now. And that was another part of my frustration. So everybody's always asking, what can they do? How can they help? And then the IAH is there. And then people don't show up for board meetings, and people don't show up for our social gatherings, our power hours, or nobody's emailing, or nobody's really like getting into the nitty gritty of how they can help. They're not really getting involved. So it's like, oh, here's my money. And then when it's time for a solution, we're just going to kind of leave the IAH out of the conversation, which for me is highly frustrating, because since 2019, so for what will go on to eventually be 5 years now, I have been working towards protection for hygienists. I've been personally invested in this. And so that's a little bit of what started my temper tantrum on Friday. I've already spoken to Deanna. I hope we're all good. I really am apologetic for those of you who were upset about my being upset, but you have to understand my frustration in that for the last 5 years, this has been our number one focused goal. If anybody wants to get involved with that as the goal, one, you're going to be really clear on that by the end of this. And two, reach out. Or if you're a member of the IAH, attend meetings. We actually do talk about this stuff on a pretty regular basis. I am on my 4th iteration of a board, and every single time that's always a topic and a point of focus for us. But officially last year we did obtain, so for 7 months now, there's actually been legal action going on and legal things going on under the, I don't know, I don't want to say the covers, but it's been going on just kind of underneath everything. And so for the past 7 months, something's already been happening. These are not talks that are happening by other organizations of things that may happen, things that could probably occur in the future, things that maybe their boards haven't even voted on. We actually have for the last 7 months legal action that created precedents that does establish a protective mechanism for those in any state, okay? So that hopefully explained a little bit of my frustration, if not all of my frustration. But let's get down to what I really want to talk about. And I know some of this is going to be review. I promise you it's not all review, but we have to get to a solid basis of where I had this talk a couple of weeks ago. It was about scope of practice, and I titled it Be Smart or Be Silent. And there was a reason, because we can't be online typing things that can be taken out of context. We can't be online typing things that are going to then be screenshotted and taken by the people who are opposed to RDHs being in myofunctional therapy. We can't be typing things and posting things and, kind of running around like chickens with our heads cut off if we don't know what it is we're talking about and we don't know how regulation versus legislation moves, because clearly they know, they understand. They get on to boards, they talk with state legislators, they get it put into a scope of practice. Everybody knows that I am not a fan of one particular speech language pathologist who is more than a bully, who is a pretty vile person to have as a colleague, but that particular person is moving in the right way. And so I'm not going to try to fight fire with, more fire. I'm fighting fire with water so that we can put out that nonsense. So to do that, you have to understand for once and for all, because I'm never going to have this conversation ever again, the difference between regulation and legislation, okay? Regulation is a rule, a law, or order that's already been established by authority to control a particular conduct, behavior, lifestyle, zone, area, field, to control, okay? So when we have legislation, that's what you need to think about for your Dental State Practice Act, because it's not regulations, it's legislation for that. Regulation would be what the dental boards do and how they are using or looking at the law that is already placed there. So legislation, like I said, is your Dental State Practice Act. That's the process of preparing and enacting laws by a legislative body. Legislative bodies are your state Senate, your state House of Representatives, your governor, and those types of those types of bodies. Your dental state board is not a legislative body. And can you imagine if they were a legislative body? I mean, we'll get into that in just a second. But that just means for us that the Board of Dentistry is going to regulate anything that affects operations of a dental office, subject matter authority, and limitations imposed already by legislative mandates. They do not create legislation. They don't write bills. They don't write laws. So all this talk I keep hearing about, we have to petition our dental board, we have to petition the New York Dental Board, that's ridiculous. They have absolutely nothing to do with legislation. All they can do is exactly what they did, say that it is not a part of the scope of practice. That's it. You can write 50 1,000 letters. You can do a full petition, and all you will ever get back from the Board of Dentistry is that we promulgate rules in the regulations that are there, in the legislation that is there. There's nothing that can be done, okay? You are not to practice as a dental hygienist and do myofunctional therapy. These two things do not belong together, all right? It's totally separate. So here's what they can do. Quick slide. You could screenshot this if you really need to see what they do, but state boards of dentistries are really just like an arm of the government, and they are not a part of, they're not elected officials in that manner. Like you don't go to your, well, maybe in some states you do, but you don't go to your ballot and like vote for these people. So they're only allowed to regulate. They do not legislate, okay? That's the way that our justice system and so forth works. But can you imagine if they were able to legislate, and if all it took was a couple of petitions? If all it took was a couple of petitions. In Florida, I think we have 5 people on our dental state board, and I know somebody who was on the board, and I could very easily just start talking about myofunctional therapy and just start, wielding a little bit of influence. I mean, the person that I know is already familiar with it and on board with referring and so forth. If I just chat him up a bit, then we could get it in the Dental State Practice Act? No, that's ridiculous. We can't have like 5 people on a dental board be the people who are the judge and jury of legislation. So that is not the way that it works, okay? So for everybody trying to write to a dental state board saying, oh no, we should be able to do this. The dental state board are not the people who write laws. They cannot modify any laws. They can't add anything to your Dental State Practice Act outside of like a very limited scope of things. So if they want you to have 5 years of education for your dental hygiene license prior to issuing one, they can do that. But anything for the Dental State Practice Act, they cannot add, modify, whatever. All they can do is look at it and say, yes, this is something we can rule on. No, this is not something we can rule on, but nothing in between as far as additions, subtractions to it, okay? And I need everybody to understand that. The Dental State Board in New York, in Utah, Kentucky, Connecticut, whatever state, has done nothing wrong by saying that it's not in your scope of practice, because I have checked time and time again, and I don't know how many of you are going through 50 state practice acts on a regular basis to find any sort of updates and so forth, but I am, and all 50, not one of those words, oral myofunctional therapy, oral facial myology, oromyofunctional therapy, just myofunctional therapy, or oral myofunctional disorders, which is really the problem word, because oral myofunctional disorders is what's being put into speech and audiology practice acts, not oral myofunctional therapy. And so you have to know the difference there. There's a big thing there with how they don't even classify it as it being a separate entity, field, profession, and so forth. So just know these boards are not doing anything wrong. And if you want to know how you can get it, I don't know why you would want it into your Dental State Practice Act, but if you want to know how you can get it into your Dental State Practice Act, I would encourage you to really get involved in government, okay? So I know it's a fun fact that some people know and not a lot of people know, but I was on the ballot. I was very, very involved in government in 2017 through 2018, a part of like big party things. I served on a board for one party for a while. I had a lot of different influence and I had a lot of education on how the law works and how legislation works and how our gubernatorial and so forth, how everything kind of comes together to create laws. So if you want changes in your Dental State Practice Act, you have to actually lobby. Okay, so I want you to start lobbying and or write to know who your representatives are. Write to your representatives. If you're going to petition somebody and you want to be effective, you need to start writing to your legislators. So your House, your assembly, you need to write to these people. If you don't know who they are, on your Senate, your assembly in the House, you have to write to all of these people and then ask them. They will have to introduce it during these committee hearings. There will have to be a vote or a floor action on it. If that is something that's going to happen or it has to be amended, then it goes back to the House. There's all sorts of, it's like a big loop for everything to happen. And if it happens, then let's say today, it's officially a law in the state of New York. Let's say hypothetically, don't take this as like a clip and put it somewhere, but hypothetically, let's say today in New York, it is a official scope of practice inclusion for oral myofunctional therapy to be practiced by registered dental hygienists. Awesome. Great. That doesn't start until January 1st, 2025. So any complaints filed against you for the rest of this year are actual valid complaints because you are still practicing something that has absolutely nothing to do with your scope of practice throughout this year. Okay, so don't believe that things happen and happen immediately and happen to your satisfaction with that sort of energy and effort, because that's not the way it works. Okay, so I need everybody to understand and ingest this information. That way you know how to proceed forward, because dealing with the dental state boards is not the way. That's not actually going to get you anywhere. All right, and if you were to lobby and try to get these things put in, oral myofunctional therapy, oral myofunctional disorders, I don't think it's going to happen, at least not in dentistry. I would really love to do lasers in the state of Florida. I would really love to be able to do a lot of stuff that I don't have currently written into the Dental State Practice Act. I don't practice clinical dentistry anymore, but should I go back, I want to be able to do more. I can do nitrous, I can do local anesthesia, but I want more, okay? Let me be able to, do Botox and to do lasers and to work with all these things that are new and interesting and that we would love to have in our State Practice Act. But guess what? Nobody cares about that, okay? There is a small number of us. We are a small segment of hygiene. We are less than 1% of all the registered dental hygienists that are already licensed throughout the country, all right? A small percentage, less than 1%, is how many of us are remotely interested in myofunctional therapy being in the Dental State Practice Act. You've got a lot more people who still don't have certain things like anesthesia, or, maybe they want indirect supervision or general supervision, or they want to use lasers, or they want to do Botox, or they want to be able to direct bill. There's a lot more things that the greater population of hygienists would like to have. So as a result, let me let you know that globally, nobody cares enough that they're going to put this in to your Dental State Practice Act anytime in the near future, okay? So, there's a whole bunch of reasons why regulation, I think, will never, ever happen. And I really feel like everybody needs to ingest this as like primary information. There is not enough research on myofunctional therapy. Yes, come at me, challenge me on that, but there's not enough research and information on myofunctional therapy in the way that we do it. What I do in my program looks nothing like what other people do in their programs. And honestly, each one of us have very different things going on in our programs that you would not know we were all taught by the same institutions, unless you're doing some cookie cutter stuff and like session one looks like session one for all your patients, even though they show up with a variety of different issues. If that's the case, then sure, we might be able to do some research on how you do myo, but I guarantee you there is no research on how you do myo. There's not enough research on it. A lot of the good research we have and what we're quoting is from places where it's already standardized and it's already like a postgraduate type of program where we're looking at research from Brazil and quoting that as if it's relevant to the US and how we run our programs. It's not. It's not at all. There's no standardization. We all look completely different in what we're doing. That's why when you go online and you ask a question and you're in OMT for the RDH, and these people are telling you, 8 different ways to try to get somebody to achieve lingual palatal suction and seal, That's why that's happening, because there is no standardization. There's no one way to get there. There's no one way it's taught. There's no one set of troubleshooting. It's so wild how many education institutions there are now and how inefficient they are. So for all of the energy behind whether or not it should be in our scope of practice, there's so many people who leave an intro course so confused, have no idea what they should do next or how they should treat a patient. And then we're like, oh no, but it should be in scope of practice. We're not even comprehending in totality the introductory information. And you want it in generalized scope of practice. That's just, I don't think it's going to happen. It's never going to happen. Okay. So that's a hoop dream. I think we would all love to win the lottery. And there's a chance we may win the lottery, but that chance is incredibly, incredibly slim. Okay. So where does that leave us? Everything is wrong, right? Where can we go right? Where does that leave us? I think I'm getting a little less delay, so I think I might be able to put myself back up here. Yay, I'm back. Where does that leave us? I like your question, Jennifer. Someone suggested getting a personal trainer certification. I hope they didn't. You don't have to do that. I will tell you that that was something that I was told I should do very early on. And so I went and I got I want to say a bunch of certifications, but I didn't. I got 2. So I'm a Reiki master because energy work is also not a field that has any regulation. And then I am a certified fitness educator, something like that. Certified fitness educator. It's similar to being a personal trainer, but it's not from that big organization that does all of the fitness and personal training certs. Neither of those mean anything for anything at all because there's no regulation. Louisiana actually is the only state that has regulation for personal trainers. So if you live in Louisiana and you get a personal trainer certificate, make sure you know what's written in that scope of practice. So they do have legislation on personal training in Louisiana. And in 2016, I don't believe it passed, but because there's no official laws right now, but in 2016, it was proposed in Washington, D.C. So not Washington State, Washington, D.C. It was proposed for there to be legislation and some bills about personal training and having a body to regulate that. And then it wasn't really, put forward. So if you're in Louisiana, it means something. Everywhere else, you could get a certification in anything you want, and it doesn't really mean anything. It's not going to impact how you do oral myofunctional therapy. I will say that just to get back to where I was, I think that this is the cutest little thing. Everybody's got, this mind blown emoji thing happening. And they're like, oh my God, what do we do? How do we help with New York? And I'm sitting here like nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. Nothing changed. And that's it. Something happened in New York and absolutely nothing happened in New York. I get that, just like when everything came out with Siegel and the big New York Times thing and everybody's losing their mind, even though that article was the best thing that could have ever possibly happened to us for people who work on function. The whole article was about how those cases didn't achieve function. That had nothing to do with Siegel. He did his job. He did really great surgical procedures. All of the functional stuff should have come from working with an IBCLC, a feeding therapist, a myofunctional therapist, working with someone in addition to having that thing. So I think that would have been a really great time for us to step up as a field and to say, hey, this article isn't about that. It's about us and the lack of information that they put out about our role. And so I think that would have been the better focus. But it's just like that, where there's a bunch of crazed noise and information and misinformation that's being thrown about, and everybody's feeling like, oh my gosh, everything's changed, and absolutely nothing has happened. Nothing has happened at all. They stated what they know to be true. It is not written in the Dental State Practice Act. Does that maybe upset some people? Maybe you might have some referral sources who are like, oh, I'm not going to refer to you. Okay, you'll get new referral sources. Like Siegel was probably down for a week or two, but really not long after that, because I was sending people there and they were going there confident. They were like, nah, I still trust him. He's fine. He's going to do a great job. Yeah, you're darn right he's going to do a great job, and you're going to do a better job at achieving your functional goals afterwards and with your active wound management and yada, yada, yada. Okay. So it's a whole lot of nothing, but a whole exceptional bit of noise. And you got to tune out the noise, okay? And then everybody keeps referencing, oh, but the ADHA, the ADHA. Yes, the ADHA has this policy. The ADHA is not, and I'm going to repeat, is not, just like the ADA is not. They're not a regulatory body. They don't do regulations. There's a lot of things that they advocate for in addition to oral facial myofunctional therapy. Just because they advocate for the use of lasers for dental hygienists does not mean that I can pick one up in the state of Florida and start using it on patients. You know why? Because I have to stay within my scope, right? I have to stay within my scope. And so the scopes, they vary. This is a chart from 2019. I really wish somebody updated this chart because this is just so much more beautiful than the ADA's chart that they have that they last updated in 2021. But their chart that they have that's all like monotone, reddish pink. But I think that this is so beautiful because you can see that there are some states like Minnesota, Nebraska, Oregon, Montana, where people are able to write prescriptions as a dental hygienist. Yay, that would be wonderful. I want that for all of us. I want everybody to be able to write prescriptions. We can't do that. It's not in our scope of practice. That's what we should be lobbying for, honestly. I would love to write a script or two. There's a lot of things I would like to do, but I probably shouldn't be doing most of the things that I want to do. Supervision, direct, indirect, all sorts of things. I think there's a beautiful chart. A lot of things have been updated. There are a lot more states that do local anesthesia since this 2019 chart was created, but this is absolutely the biggest issue. You can't quote the ADHA as if they're the overall arching ruler of all dental hygiene scope. Every state looks different. So what you're really quoting is our dental state practice acts. And again, how does legislation work? Not with our dental boards, okay? That is with your legislators. Make sure you are talking to whoever represents you, your state senator, your state assemblyman, like talk to those people if you want it in your scope of practice. Why you would want it in your scope of practice when you're looking at this kind of chart and you're seeing the limitations that that would put on you professionally, I don't know, but to each his own, okay? If you guys are going to stir pots and you're going to start writing to dental boards, be prepared for what comes back at you. It's not in your scope of practice, and if you want it in your scope of practice, talk to legislators, but you're going to be restricted by what's in your scope of practice if it's something that you want to do. So if you need direct supervision, that's how you're going to be doing your myo with a doctor in the room. So just keep them separated, please. Please, please keep them separated. There's absolutely nothing else to do but keep them separated. Like I said, I went and I got my Reiki certification. I do Reiki just separately. Like I do Reiki and it has nothing to do with myo, or I do Reiki sessions with my myo, or I do sometimes we're doing, cranial nerve stuff. Like who's regulating cranial nerves? Who's regulating energy work? Who's regulating like a third of the things that I'm doing in my practice along with my myofunctional therapy? It looks so wildly different from anything that you could probably imagine as just streamlined myofunctional therapy that you wouldn't be able to tell. My scope of practice for dental hygiene, there's zero overlap, absolutely zero overlap between what I do clinically as a myofunctional therapist. So keep the two separated. If you haven't kept them separated in some way, shape, or form, if you are working in a dental practice, please, the only way to do it is to have two separate payrolls if you're getting paid by the same dental office. And I need you clocking out as a registered dental hygienist, clocking in as a myofunctional therapist. I need you to have a separate 1099 if that's the way that you're going to do it. So you clock out from hygiene and you are just paid per hour, however you're working it out. That's a different video for a whole nother time. But you have to keep it separated. Don't feel like your dentist is going to be able to protect you. Granted, you do have some employers who will go above and beyond, but please take every step you can to protect yourself and your employer, especially if you feel like your employer would go to bat for you. Protect your employer by requiring all these things to be separate. Stop putting all the patient information in your, Easy Dental or Curve Dental or whatever your practice software is. Don't put it there. Get a separate EHR. I keep saying charm is free. If that's the barrier, it's like, oh, I don't have money for one, then either don't use one and keep a really good like organized file system, like keep file folders, be completely retro, or make sure that you're using something that is free. Charm is absolutely free. There's a learning curve and it's going to take a little bit, but use that. You could sign up for simple practice IQ, like whatever else. Sign up for something, keep it separate, okay, in every shape and form possible. And then Sarah's amazing. I had her speak for the IAH before she offered it as something that she did individually. And if you're a member of the IAH, you can always go back. It is in our library. So Sarah Mercier had spoken an hour-long lecture about what to do, what legal considerations you may have to make. It was a very good lecture. It's in the library. Just log in and you'll be able to find that. If you don't know where it is or how to find it, or you're not a member yet, just reach out to me. I'll let you know. I could also send out an email. That's what I'll do. I'll put it in the next newsletter. That way everybody can go back and review it. But you're kind of going off of if you were a personal trainer. That's how I talk about myo anyway. It makes you more of a guide. You're not really like therapist in that exact form of the word. We're more like trainers because we're helping to remediate these issues, but we're not doing so directly. There's not a whole lot of tactile or touch involved with the myofunctional aspect of things. You're not moving muscles for people. You are actually instructing them. You're giving them visual cues, verbal cues. You're really working with them in order to help them eliminate dysfunction. And it's not something that is unlike being a personal trainer, being a yoga teacher. You could do that too. You could do whatever without any sort of rules or regulations. The personal trainers aren't losing their minds. And I have to say, honestly, hygienists, we're the redheaded stepchilds of the field, okay? Absolutely redheaded stepchild of the field, because we know that there are people who are unlicensed, have zero healthcare licensure. They are social workers, they are moms off the street, they're IBCLCs that have no background in any sort of healthcare. They just have coursework behind them. There are people who don't have the knowledge and the information we have prior to even becoming registered dental hygienists, to getting our licensure, all of that trauma that we had to go through. So there are people who are practicing myofunctional therapy that don't have our backgrounds and they don't get reported. Why? Because there's nowhere to report them to. So we wind up being the redheaded stepchild of the field, where it's like, oh, but we could always report to a dental board. That's easy. We know how to reach the dental board. We can just, just send in a complaint right then and there. Awesome. We've reported. And other people don't get that because there's nowhere to report them to. Where do you report them to? How do you really regulate? What do they have to lose? They don't have a license. They don't have a professional license. They have nothing on the line. So we are the redheaded stepchildren of the field, and we're kind of navigating this all incorrectly. We have to navigate it like a personal trainer navigates their profession. There's absolutely nothing that is guiding them as far as regulation. There's no boards for any state, with the exception of Louisiana. Louisiana has legislation, but I don't believe that they have a personal trainer board. So there are no boards generally for at least 49 states, and they're really just guided by their education and what their organization has as their scope of practice. So I would say start guiding yourself by that. The IAH has a wonderful little, we believe the scope of practice of airway hygienist is. Guide yourself by something like that. Guide yourself by whatever the IAOM has as your guidance for what that is, what that means to be an oral facial myologist, what the AOMT says that it means to be an oral myofunctional therapist. Guide yourself by a professional organization that is going to rally behind you and support you with, this is your scope. These are the ethics and practices upon which you should be modeling your career. Don't go looking for scope of practice in your Dental State Practice Act. It just doesn't exist. It's not there. You are like a personal trainer. You are like a Reiki master. You have no guidance whatsoever. You don't even have to be certified to be a personal trainer. I can call myself a personal trainer and I don't have to take any courses. Nobody's going to be looking for that. Okay. Well, granted, some people might, but certainly not for myofunctional therapy. Absolutely nobody's looking for it. A lot of people are still trying to figure out what myofunctional therapy is. So just carry yourself in a manner that other professionals would, Okay. I just saw a question pop up. Hold on. I have little squirrel brain right now because my squirrel brain's like, ooh, what's that question? So thoughts on not having OMT by name along with other credentials. Hold on. Let me put that up there. That way it's easier for me to read. Website, business documents, social media. Yes. So OMT alone without other credentials, I think is really good. On my business card, I have the RDH because please, I worked too hard. Hygiene school was traumatic for me. These go all around New Jersey and Florida. So I really don't care. I think that on my website as well, I have RDH. And it's just something that I value. These are my credentials. If I was a personal trainer, I'm still going to have my credentials on there. I didn't go through the trauma of hygiene school, and I don't pay these annual renewal fees for nothing. Okay. I will write RDH or CRDH on anything that I can. But I definitely do put, if I wasn't going to have RDH and it was just going to be my name, and I know you guys can't see this because it's too small, but I definitely put specializing in myofunctional therapy. So I just have that, I don't know, as my thing. I don't put OMT, I don't put COM because I don't have a COM, I don't have a QOM, I don't have those things. It's very common knowledge why I don't have a COM. The QOM is because my program looks way too different from what is taught there. So I took the test, but it just didn't work out for me because my program just looks too different. So the clinical aspects, I couldn't make it just myo. That just doesn't work for me anymore. But without any of those extra little letters, like, you're totally fine. You don't need any of that stuff, to be honest. I just write specializing in myofunctional therapy. That's not to say do what I do, but that's just what I do. Okay, so here's a couple of things that I definitely want you guys to stop doing. Please stop doing. Do not petition your state board without any legal guidance on wording. One, you may get nowhere. Two, you might make things worse for somebody else who is brought to the board, who has a complaint filed. If there's too many of us kind of creating a lot of chatter and we're creating a problem, we might wind up where dental sleep medicine is, where there have been things that have been prohibited because in certain states, like, certain people can't function in the full capacity of dental sleep medicine by doing like home sleep tests and things like that, or they have to work with a physician as opposed to just going off the guidance of the home sleep testing for their oral appliances and the insertion and so forth. There's a lot of nuance that actually wound up coming into play since the 2017 ADA recommendation, and then furthermore legislation that started to happen because there was a lot of just chitter chatter about what's going on with sleep. So don't petition your state board without legal guidance on wording. You could talk to a lawyer yourself, or you can ask me. We do have some wording and we do have some things that we are doing in the background in the IAH to gather as much information as possible for all of our future legal actions. Do not advocate for it to be in scope with state legislators. You can if you want to. I think it's fruitless. It's absolutely fruitless, and it's going to wind up putting us in a worse position overall. But I just wouldn't advocate for it to be in scope unless you know that you can work 100% independently. Otherwise, again, you're creating a lot of chatter about this field that is absolutely unnecessary. When's the last time you heard of personal trainers petitioning to have, a board of their own? You haven't heard of that. Energy workers don't do that. You could get sound therapy, and there's no regulation on what a sound therapist is, how much education they need to have, what licensure they need to do so, and who's going to regulate what sound therapy is. There's absolutely none of that. It's just something that is done, and is done in the calm and the quiet and with no harm to any patients. And we know we're not harming people with myofunctional therapy. I have yet to hear that somebody has done undue harm to someone with myofunctional therapy. Do not hesitate to ask questions. Look, I've been doing this for almost 5 years. I've talked to over a dozen lawyers. It's probably closer to what would be nearly 2, but I've talked to over a dozen lawyers in various states. I've been working at this longer than anybody else has been trying to find a solution that can expeditiously get us into a place where people feel safe practicing and they're not worried, because if there is something and they're called to their board, there is some sort of precedence established. Don't hesitate to ask questions. Reach out, like ask questions, but don't do it publicly. Like stop doing that. Really don't. I think that that's not helping. You're going to get people who are screenshotting it, who are sending it out of the group. You're giving ammunition to the people who are against you. So let's all just kind of quiet a little bit of the noise on that, and don't scare peers out of, you know, your own lack of understanding. So absolutely nothing has happened. I wouldn't go scaring people away, or steering them away, I should say, from the profession, because you're really not sure what's happening, or, you know, you think, oh no, now's not a good time to get into the field. I mean, now is the same as it was December 2023. Nothing has changed. Literally nothing has changed. I think it's still a wonderful profession. I think most of us agree it's a wonderful profession, and we're really grateful for it. Even if all it did for us was help one of our family members or a loved one, I think that's phenomenal in a profession. If you're not even fully out of clinical dentistry, this is awesome to have as a profession. I think that we shouldn't scare people out of it. I think we should start steering people to smarter choices, because again, introductory courses for some reason do not have an introductory price, but everybody's okay with the fact that these introductory courses have people who leave it and are like, I don't know what to do. And then they have to keep going and seeking other information and courses and so forth. Yes, we never stop learning, but like if you're going to be an intro course, have an intro price, or have some sort of guaranteed way of knowing that you are actually providing people with the confidence to confidently practice and implement what they have learned for the fee that they have paid to learn the information. Because again, information is free. Information is very, very free. Okay. And there's nothing that's more publicly available actually than legislation. So if you're confused about anything that's going on in your state ever, you can always just look it up. You can always have access to all of your state bills, all of the notices, anything that's ever been put out by a state board, or what's the overarching agency for regulating boards of licensure and so forth. Everything is publicly available, including information about myofunctional therapy. All of this stuff is publicly available. If you're just curious, you don't take an intro course. You don't go paying for an intro course. There are books you can read where you can just flip through a 300-page textbook and you'll kind of have the nitty and the gritty on the field. You really don't need to invest in a course if you don't plan on actively practicing. But that's my TED Talk on that. But don't scare your peers out just because, you know, all of this stuff is going on. Let's try to just do better, because we can do better. We can be a strong field. We just have to start going about these things by having like the deepest understanding of how our law works, of how legislation works, of how we can practice efficiently and safely, and ensure that we're really going to be able to carry forward this profession that honestly dentistry was the start of. How is it that we're at this place that 100 years after this whole thing was started by a dentist, that we're now at risk of losing it because of whatever's happening or not happening? It just doesn't make sense. I think we can do this, and we can do this exceptionally well. I think we've been doing it better than a lot of other professionals. We certainly are deserving of a seat at the table. And so I'm not giving up on that. I just know that there's a way to go about it. Okay. An absolute way to go about it. I like this question. Again, squirrel brain. And this is a great time for questions, guys, because that was my last slide. So I don't have anything else coming after this. I was going to ask for questions, but this is a great question, Sherry. Where might I find examples of disclaimers for the website I am building? You can find a lot of free templates, not free. I don't know. I don't want to say free and then the free ones aren't really that good, but you can actually pay for templates. There are lawyers who have side hustles, and I love lawyers with a side hustle, because then you can pay like $35 and you get a wonderful template for healthcare professionals. And then they'll do like a consult with you, and they'll be on the phone with you and be able to kind of like guide you and say that, yes, this is good, or that's not, or whatever. And you can do that so much cheaper than actually calling up a lawyer. So people with side hustles, you can go and use places like Rocket Lawyer. You can use LegalZoom. They have legal paperwork. You can always just Google it, because I swear to you, information is so incredibly free. There is absolutely nothing that you've needed to know that you're like, oh man, I have to pay for this. You probably don't. You can definitely look stuff up. You'll be fine. You'll be able to find what your limitations are for like what you can put on a website. A lot of your disclaimers are going to have to come on like your terms of use. That I know for sure. So the terms of use for your website, and you need to have like either a pop-up or something that says use of this site, like continuing beyond the homepage, is an agreement to our terms of use, and then with like a link to it. If you go to themyospot.com, I have mine up there. Mine are probably, if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, it'll say something about that. I have my privacy policy, my terms of use, and my website disclaimer. I'm pretty sure all there. And so you could definitely get an example of what that might look like. And then you could always run that by a lawyer. I have there are different types of memberships that you can also use too. There are legal memberships where you can get to talk to a lawyer. Like I've spent money talking to lawyers, but I've also not spent money in certain ways. There are memberships that you can have and you can obtain. That way you can have legal guidance in the event that certain things happen to you. And look into your malpractice act, your malpractice insurance, not an act, your malpractice insurance. Your malpractice insurance may cover some legal guidance for you too. The Small Business Association, the SBA, is a government program that also has some resources for small business owners and might be a way that you can talk to lawyers too to figure out what it is that you can do so that you get the wording correct on your website. And hopefully that went above and beyond in answering your questions. That's always my goal, is to kind of go a little bit above and beyond. I sincerely hope that this was valuable. I hope to never speak about this ever again. There's enough of you on here that honestly, you guys could really just, link it and share it with somebody else. It's going to be on YouTube. That way you guys are able to, watch it back if you need to, or reference it for something else. Hopefully we don't have to have this conversation anymore. I promise I won't have any more adult temper tantrums, at least not publicly. And so I will avoid posting if I am frustrated. But I appreciate you all tolerating my nonsense for the small bit of time that window of nonsense was on there, especially you, Deanna. I'm so sorry. Completely, it wasn't about you. It's all about all of this stuff that's going on and how ridiculous it is. And so with that, I don't see any other questions. So I am going to hop off, but I appreciated all of you being here. And I think that we can do better and we will do better. And let's go forward and let's do this and execute with excellence, because there's nobody like RDH in OMT. Bye, guys.